Hi everyone, thank you all for coming out tonight. My name is Christina and I'm the events coordinator here at Books Are Magic. Before we get started, I wanted to point out some logistics for how tonight's gonna go. We'll be doing a hand-raised audience Q&A towards the end of the event, so start thinking of questions to ask now. After the talk tonight, Brando will be signing and personalizing books at the desk near where you checked in. We also have additional books available to purchase from my colleague at the register. If you're joining us virtually on the live stream, we'd love to encourage you to buy a copy of My Name is Iris online using the link in the live stream description. It's my privilege to introduce you all tonight to Brando Skyhorse's My Name is Iris, a riveting literary dystopian novel set in the near future America where mandatory identification wristbands make second-generation immigrants into second-class citizens. My Name is Iris is an all-too-possible story about family, intolerance, and hope, offering a brilliant and timely look at one woman's journey to discover who she can't and can be. Brando Skyhorse is the author of The Madonnas of Echo Park, which won the 2011 PEN/Hemingway Award and the Sue Kaufman Award for First Fiction, and Take This Man, which was named one of the Kirkus Review's Best Nonfiction Books of 2014. He also co-edited the anthology We Wear the Mask, 15 Stories of Passing in America. He teaches English and creative writing at Indiana University Bloomington. Brando will be joined in conversation tonight by John Reed. John Reed is the author of A Still Small Voice, The Whole, Snowball's Chance, All the World's a Grave, Tales of Woe, Free Boat, A Drama in Time, and The Family Dolls. His writing appears in the Paris Review, the New York Times, Harper's, and Rolling Stone, among others. He's an associate professor and the current director of the MFA in Creative Writing at the New School University. Let's all give a very warm welcome to Brando and John.
I'm a little nervous about this high top chair. So, oh, you're gonna sit right there? All right. Yeah, let me just slide back. Yeah, I'll do that. How are we doing, everybody?
Great.
Yeah? I love that. Yeah, great. Thank you. This is a really just, I guess, important moment for me here. It's really great to see people from all different parts of my life all here in the same room. And yeah, thinking about like when I moved to New York, God, almost over 20 years ago, thinking I wanted to write, I wanted to publish books, and had all these like ideas and aspirations about how that was going to go, and thinking about the things that came true and the things that didn't necessarily quite work out, but realizing kind of right here on the tail end of turning 50, that it really is an enormous privilege just to be publishing hardcover fiction and to be sharing it in a room with all of you. So not to get maudlin or sentimental, because those of you who know me know that I can do that from time to time, excessively so. I'm happy that all of you are here for whatever reason that you're here. If you knew me from before, if you just walked in off the street, I was doing my best to try to get random strangers. I think we got in one or two, I'm not sure, but whatever brought you here, whatever reason you're here, whatever brought you through that door, thank you. It really, really means an enormous amount to me. My friend John Reed, who I've known for many years, is going to be, I guess, doing a little Q&A after I read. And to me, John also is the perfect person for this event. I met him at a small place, a restaurant that I don't think exists anymore, down on the Lower East Side. It was a place called Juno's. And I had just read like a short story that I had read, or a short story that I had written. Wasn't any good, wasn't published anywhere. And I think there might have been 5 people there to see me. And I was at the bar and John walked over. He's like, hey, that was a good story. We should be friends. Mm-hmm. And that was, 22 years ago? New York is filled with people like that and filled with stories like that. So I'm really happy that John's here as well. So he'll also, if you're very nice, talk to you about the book that he just published, which is, right, it's from Palgrave, and is it about Orwell? It's about Orwell, yeah. It's also $120 a copy. So maybe we can work out an installment plan. I'm not really sure, but we'll figure something out. I'm going to try to read the opening here. And then maybe if I need to read a little more, I'll read a little more. And we'll kind of see how this goes. Sorry, the mic and holding the book at the same time type thing. I should be better at this. Do I need my glasses? Oh, God. Oh, try without the glasses. No, I need the glasses. I'm sorry. It's nice for August, isn't it? Right? Yeah, thank you. There's one person up here who is actually, these aren't rhetorical questions. I'm trying to engage here. Yeah, so thank you. Yeah. 81 degrees. Really lovely for August. And I think the less I say about this opening or the book, the better. So, looking out in the audience. Kid Allen's in the house. This one's for you. Whenever I ask my mama what her first memory of America was, she says, "Who cares about me? You were born here. You were born here." That's my first strip of memories, my parents taking turns to berate me whenever I misbehaved, or, later, asked about their past to deflect an imminent punishment. Never stop doing that, or be quiet, or finish your dinner. It was, "You were born here. It is something you can never lose. Don't forget that." "How can I shouted. "You tell me every day." I was 5 years old when I said this. "Ay, que malagradecida." By the way, that's bad. I had no life before America the way my parents did. I am a second-generation Mexican-American daughter of Mexican immigrants, meaning that, of course, I was ungrateful. I heard about my parents' sacrifices and how they forded an endless river of prejudices so often it sounded like a polished comic routine. When I was born, a white nurse asked my father, Gonzalo, "English is okay, Dad?" Through a haze of drugs and pain, my mama, Dolores, sprang upright in her hospital bed and shouted, "Lady, we speak English." My mama, who is proud of her English but rarely uses it aside from talking to me, enrolled me in English-only classes at our elementary school. Mr. Chela decided the Spanish language program was a better fit. The idea was parents could better help their children with their homework in a language they understood. Dolores refused. School was for me to learn English, not her. "I don't want you to be a slave in America," my mama said. "Teacher told me Lincoln freed the slaves," I said proudly. Mama rapped me on my butt with her chanclas twice, once for being disrespectful and twice for wasting my knowledge. "Use your smarts for good," she said, not back-talking to Mama. Mr. Chela threatened to transfer me to a school in the valley, an hour away, on an old, wheezing school bus, thinking Mama would back down. "If they talk to you in Spanish," she said, "answer in English. If you don't, the school will take you away from me and we will never see you again." My mama and I ended up in the principal's office, two scolded women sitting in moldy, oversized chairs. Dolores shouted at Mr. Chela while I trembled that someone would come and snatch me away. "Cálmase, señora," he said. "Somos mexicanos, ¿verdad?" Dolores slapped away a proffered high five and said, "Show respect for a woman." "My own kids are in Spanish language classes," he said. "Your daughter is not ready." Dolores rolled up her sleeves and said, "Look at our skin. I am lighter than you. Who is more American? Who deserves to learn English more?" "You're crazy," Mr. Chela said, "but you win. Now please get out of my office." Mama tells these stories often, at family dinners and to strangers at tiendas pushing plump babies in shopping carts. My father, Gonzalo, whose English is tentative, shy, like a child hiding behind a parent's leg, has long ago mastered his passive head nod in agreement. He is my mama's physical responsibility and repays her care with benign acquiescence. Before his erratic hand trembling got him fired and then made him unemployable, he was a hard worker, which is how every Mexican describes their dad. On Gonzalo's job sites, white men with clean nails called my father a solid guy, which he repeated with pride. We do not say retired in our house. Trabajadores never retire. Watching endless TV football matches, Gonzalo's body molded into his recliner and never left. My father's confident masculine hands disfigured into catatonic pincers for his remote controls. Dolores and Gonzalo were born in Mexico. They didn't share or explain what life there was like for them. When I asked, they said, "Everything is here. Who cares what came before? Did you forget already that you were born here? Act it." Growing up, Dolores asked me over and over, "What are the rules to live in America?" I didn't understand why, but I knew the answers well. Speak English in front of strangers. No Spanish anywhere outside the house. Walk far, but not too far, from gringos on a sidewalk until they have acknowledged you. Call any gringo you meet sir, even if they are young. Call any gringo you meet ma'am, especially if they are. And never, ever cry in front of anyone, even if you think they are your friend. Do that, my mama said, and they'll let you become anything you want here. You can clap if you want. You don't have to. Thank you. That was about maybe 4.5 minutes. A little more? A little more?
Yeah.
We'll do a little more. So there's a lot going on in this book. There's ghost. There's a wall that appears out of nowhere. There's like a band type system, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it, and I should know this since I'm trying to sell you this book. It's about identity and security and everything else, and much of the book is being driven by the insecurity of the narrator, whose name is Iris Prince, and she was originally born Inez. And as you learn in the book, she's basically trying to live a life where she just blends in nice and easy and just doesn't have to deal with all of the other kind of like stuff that's happening outside her front door, metaphorically and literally. And one of the things that was challenging was trying to figure out, how does somebody become a person who basically wants to divorce themselves from their own identity, from their own personhood? How does that happen? How does that change a person who basically was born in America and then decides, I just want to blend in, so the more I blend in, the more American I become. And I think in fiction, you kind of have to need a moment. And this is, I think, kind of the moment for her. She is befriended by a young girl in her neighborhood named Brenda. And so this is her story with Brenda. I brought books home from the school library, read them aloud to Brenda, and asked her to read them aloud to me. By the way, they're both young girls, about 7 or 8 years old. The two of us listened to our own voices transporting us to the boundless worlds we imagined. In a corner of Brenda's living room, I cleaned out Brenda's Easy Bake. Then we played library. She would ask me, the librarian, for books, and I would help her find them. Once I brought over a small bag of flour. "We can use this to cook," I said. I didn't tell Brenda how I threw a public tantrum and earned a rare butt tapping from my father to get Dolores to buy it. "It doesn't say Maseca," Brenda said. "It's American," I said. "It's better." "American?" Brenda asked. "Yeah, that's what we are," I said. "You and me. We were born here. Somos Americanas." "You were born here?" "Sí, but not my mama," Brenda said. "Doesn't matter. You're American. Don't forget that," I said, already sounding like my own mama. "Also, if you eat McDonald's, you're super American. We have to do that too." "Today?" Brenda asked. "No, we have to work for our McDonald's first. Those are the rules. We can read for a while and then get McDonald's as a reward. I did some chores for Mrs. Yanis and I can buy us food." I walked Brenda to the Arroyo Seco branch more of a hoarder's house than a library. It was filled with out-of-date science books and month-old newspapers. I sat us at a broken corner table and split the books and papers between us. I learn English for school this way, I told Brenda. Then I go to McDonald's once a month to practice it. By yourself? Brenda asked. I'm not supposed to eat fast food before dinner, I said. I don't order much, French fries and an apple pie. Today we'll order double fries, since they're too good to share. At McDonald's, I heaved open a large glass door for Brenda. It's cold in here, she said, and her body shivered while we waited to order. Let me speak English, I said. I was nervous ordering for someone else, but recited the words inside my head like a prayer. I want 2 small French fries, I said, 1 apple pie, and a large Coke. We are staying here to eat. Está bien, hablo español, a young server said. I stared at the busy workers until I found a young white man in a crisp blue short-sleeved shirt with a silver pen in his breast pocket and waved him over. Excuse me, I said. This one spoke in Spanish when I ordered in English. Please fire her. He laughed and said, we don't fire people for making our customers feel welcome, but we're happy to serve you. Have a great day. I carried our tray of food to a cool plastic table and set Brenda's portions in front of her. Don't eat the fries too fast, I said. You'll get tummy sick. I want to come back here every day. You can't or you'll get gordita, I said. But ask your mom to take you for breakfast. That's the only time they serve hash browns, and the hash browns are better than the fries. Your mom could like it here too. Better than the fries? I'm going to ask her until she does, Brenda said. Let's come back tomorrow, like amigas americanas. We can't eat here every day, I said. Please, Brenda said, my mom will treat us both before she goes to work. I sighed, and I thought, podrías ser mi hermanita. You could be my little sister. It felt too weird to say aloud. I never said I would meet her. I just shrugged my shoulders. Maybe a nod. Nothing more. Fun, Brenda said. The next morning, a middle-aged man in a car watched me walk across the restaurant parking lot. He had a bowl haircut and was reading a comic book while he ate a sandwich, taking small, methodical bites. He scratched at his face with the hand holding his food, getting crumbs on his chin. I stopped at the playground by the front doors and gripped a hamburger ride-on spring toy. The man smiled at me, nodded at the McDonald's, and mouthed, "Go in," his tongue full of chewed bread. I couldn't see if Brenda and her mother were inside, but something felt wrong. When he reached over to his glove compartment, I ran home. I opened my front door, thinking of what to say to Brenda about why I didn't show up. An hour passed, then 2 more. I set down my book and my crust-free mustard sandwich, staring back and forth down the long outdoor corridors. I fiddled with the holes in the screen door. I played hopscotch alone. Brenda and her mother had gone to McDonald's for breakfast, like I told her to. I would later recognize the man I saw in the car from the television reports. He was an unemployed correctional officer who, sometime after I left, walked into the restaurant wearing a stolen police uniform with a duffel bag holding several guns and 600 rounds of ammunition. In a conspiracy-laden journal entry discovered later in a storage unit, he wrote, "I was a patriotic American. Society had their chance." Brenda was shot 5 times. 22 others, including Brenda's mother, were murdered. 19 of them were Mexican American. And 15 of those were children. He allowed white parents and their kids to leave while he reloaded. "I'm not here for you today," he said. Grief and wailing swelled through my building like floodwater, pouring through our apartment's paper-thin walls. I watched the local news every night where I heard the massacre's details recited on a loop. I don't know why I did this. Maybe I thought they had gotten Brenda's death wrong and the news would change somehow. But why would it change? Not once had I heard Brenda's or her mother's name on the news. Didn't see pictures of their faces. I never learned how 5 separate bullets, a bullet seemed such a big thing, could fit inside Brenda's tiny body. Gonzalo asked Dolores, "Por qué la dejas ver esas porquerías?" Las noticias la van a volver loca. Ni las entiende, my mom said. She's fine. The McDonald's was raised. In its place, a field partially enclosed by chain link mesh fencing, which became an ofrenda of flowers, photographs, candles, and mounds of stuffed animals. Plans for a stone memorial were considered for months, but scrapped when the head of the local bar owners association said at a televised city council meeting, "I'm boycotting this unless we only put the real Americans on there." Soon I couldn't sleep and demanded we go to the site. "Por qué?" Dolores asked. "I didn't even know that you liked her." Ducking through a gaping hole in the fence, I walked amid the ofrendas laid in the patches of scratchy, ankle-crawling weeds. Dolores, stingy with public displays of affection, clutched my hand, but I slipped out of reach. I tried to imagine, amid the dirt mounds and valleys where they found Brenda's body. Her hands were like teacups, her hips no bigger than starlings. Where had she been frozen in time? Was it here by these piles of trash bags where Brenda collapsed and fell? I was searching for something I could find there that would let me cry, and hated myself that I hadn't yet. A part of me had been stolen, and I didn't know where to find it or how to get it back. Why didn't I go inside to warn Brenda? I don't know. I wish I had. I found tucked underneath a novena candle a crumpled page from a Bible, Proverbs chapter 10, verse 7, "The memory of the just is blessed, but the name of the wicked shall rot." I didn't believe this. I saw Brenda's murderer's goofy Sears family portrait every news hour, heard the consolation he was offered in sympathetic editorials and interviews with his wife and 3 kids. How terrible for his family, a newscaster said. 2 days before my parents moved us to our first house, I found outside my front door Brenda's Easy Bake Oven wrapped in a trash bag. After several revolting attempts, one of which almost choked my father, Gonzalo, I baked a palatable cake, which I left at the ofrenda site by a framed picture of the Virgin Mary. On the cake, written in large, crusty blue frosting, "Hi, B." Thanks, guys.
So it's a pleasure to talk with Brando today. Thank you, Brando. I guess I'll just kick in here. Inez with a question. Maybe I'll ask 3 and then open to the audience, and if people have questions, they can chime in, and I've got more if you don't. Inez isn't so easy to like. While you were writing, was it at times hard to be close to her?
Yeah, so Inez is, that's the name she was given at birth. And through, I guess, what you would call microaggression, macroaggression, she has an English teacher that just changes it to Iris because like, well, that's just easier. So you don't mind that, right? And she's like, oh, well, somebody's helping me be more American and blend in. Why wouldn't I mind that, right? Yeah, Iris is a really fascinating character. And I think that a lot of the initial feedback that I got when I was writing this, which is always great feedback to get when you're writing a book and it hasn't been published yet. It's like, yeah, I don't like this person. I just really this person, this is not my kind of person. And I heard that pretty regularly for about 5 years. And I guess I don't know if that means that I was just stubborn and like, oh, trust me, I know where I'm going with this. Or like, well, this is who she is. I kind of just have to like roll with it. I think your characters, when you're writing fiction, they just kind of show up as they are. And that was just who she was. And I realized that, Iris is a little bit from stuff that's going on in my life, people I know, but Iris is also me. And so trying to understand like, oh, I'm not taking this personally when somebody says that they don't like Iris. They're not saying they don't like me. They're saying they really didn't understand what her angle was. And for me, the angle was always, here's a person who is more interested in security than anything else. Here is a Mexican-American woman who essentially just wants to be left alone. She wants the freedom to be an American, to right to be left alone. And the more she isn't left alone, the grouchier and angrier and, I guess, unlikable she got. So for me, thinking about like all the books in here and all the unlikable narrators and all the history of like, I'm not going to mention any, canonical names, but a lot of canonical writers have written a lot of really unpalatable characters, many of which had like no reason or explanation at all as to why they were unlikable or jerks. They just were. I was like, that seems like a pretty good reason in today's day and age. Here's a person of color who just wants the right to be left alone. And if people are reading them in an unlikable way, oh well.
Okay, beautiful. So, it's interesting you say that because I thought she wasn't easy to like. I had to work at liking her.
I'm actually glad to hear you say that because I feel like you have just such overwhelming positivity towards like everything in the world, especially what's on the page. So the fact that like even you were like, yeah, this is right. I'm feeling some resistance here, right? But I think that again, it's like it's a first person. You'll read. Hopefully you'll buy, or if you read just based on what I read. It's like a very intimate first person. So it's just that sense of like you're basically getting this running commentary from this person who's just kind of like going through the world, and just all of those like distilled and unfiltered thoughts are just basically kind of coming onto the page. And I kind of felt like that's what I was living like the past 6.5, 7 years. This is obviously kind of a response to what's been going on in the past 6.5, 7 years without mentioning any names or any people again. The TRUMP word is nowhere to be found in this book because I realized when I started trying to write this as a satire, I couldn't keep up. It was too ridiculous. Everything that I put in the book, it became like old news. So I was like, just completely like just set that aside. And let's just kind of get this one character's like almost kind of running monologue about like how she's responding to these events. She is a recently divorced woman who's moved into a brand new house in a perfect neighborhood. And one day she looks outside her window, she's there with her 9-year-old daughter, and there is a wall where there was no wall before. And at the same time, she's living in this kind of like dystopic, future-esque environment where the state in which she lives in, which is never named, has passed this referendum, which basically says that everyone needs to get a wristband in order to like replace their like state ID. But the only people who are eligible for those wristbands are people who can prove parental citizenship. So all of a sudden, she's got this wall over here. She's got these bands over here, which of course she's the only one that she basically knows doesn't qualify for these bands. All of a sudden, these bands are everywhere, and they're being sold as this like great new invention. Oh, you don't need IDs anymore. You don't need money anymore. This will like track your garbage usage, your water usage. You're saving the environment. And to me, that like doesn't even seem like satire. That's basically where we're at, kind of. Even the idea of having somebody say you aren't a citizen because your parents weren't citizens, like that's not my idea. A U.S. senator proposed that as a constitutional amendment a few years ago. So this isn't even like, oh, I'm taking it farther down the road and trying to show you what I think it's going to be like in 20 or 30 years' time. We're here. So if she's a little unlikable, yeah, damn right. Maybe we're all a little unlikable right now because we're all a little on edge, which I think is okay.
So this next question is a little selfish because I was just really curious about this line. But on page 62, there was a moment of dialogue that struck me as important, where Inez is trying to get help with the wall, and nobody is willing to help. And a contractor responds, "Lady, sometimes crazy things just happen." And what was interesting to me about that line is it seemed to indicate that there were so many inherent failings in our identities that reality could break for any one of us at any time. And I kind of wondered how you saw the larger implications of that moment.
See, this is the benefit of having an English professor right here next to me. That's like a super deep, super intense reading, which I really love. Because now I'm thinking that's way better than anything I had like envisioned with that very basic line. Like, I think that's on the money. I think that's absolutely on the money. And I think that when you're trying to construct a narrative, and I think we talked a little bit about this, when you're trying to construct a narrative where all these fantastical things are happening, the most important thing as a writer is that you're essentially trying to sell the plausibility of this universe. So if it feels plausible, then you'll go along for the ride. Because again, if like, we're to kind of like calculate, okay, like what are the kind of fantastical things that happen in this book? There's a wall growing out of the front yard, and there's no reason for it, and it can't really be stopped. There's the bans that are going on, passed by a voter referendum. It's just something that's happening now. There's a ghost kid, which is basically somebody who's haunting Iris from her past. And, there's all the stuff that like she sees that as the ghost gets, like the haunting becomes more intense, like their handprints left behind and like, crosses and all this other stuff, right? So I feel like I wanted to kind of like just nod to the reader and say like, look, for you to accept this, like I have to do this in the most plausible and realistic way imaginable, because if I were just to tell you this is what the book is about, it would sound absurd. Mm-hmm. So maybe that was, I think, my way of saying like, yeah, hey, I realize that like I'm asking you to kind of like make a lot of leaps of faith here, but I don't know, haven't we been all asked to make a lot of leaps of faith over the past 7 years?
So my third question, before I open to audience questions, is the reviews have been a bit of a roller coaster on this project. Would you like to talk about that a bit?
Sure. I would love to talk about that. It's one of those things where like you just kind of you do your work and you put your work out there and hopefully good things come to it. And I'm not the world's fastest writer by any means. I remember I went on book tour back in 2010 for my first book, and I had a book tour guide with me in Los Angeles who had worked with Janet Ivanovich, and had told me, well, friend, if you really want to succeed in publishing, you got to give something to your publisher every 6 months. So this was June 2010, and he's like, so December 2010, tick, 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 and I thought, that was really good advice. And 13 years later, here we are. So, I feel like that sense of like getting feedback and whatever, it's always been a very like challenging, kind of thing for me. And especially like with literary fiction, hopefully you get like 1 or 2 reviews, hopefully somebody sees it and pays attention to it. We got a couple of pre-pubs from Publishers Weekly and Kirkus. For those of you who do not work in publishing, these are reviews you would never read, or from journals you've never heard of, and would not really have any like significant impact in whether you would buy the book or not. But of course, the author gets them, and they were both pretty poor. They were not great. And it was like, that was the first feedback that I'd gotten outside of my circle. And, me being the, stoic personality that I am, I'm like, well, that's it. Like, it's over. Like, 6.5 years. Oh, well, I guess that's the response. And like, I so believed that because again, you're so desperate for feedback. And then the book came out, and then thankfully, miraculously, right, Alex, my amazing publicist, Alex, miraculously, we got a really wonderful review from Ron Charles in the Washington Post, and we got a really, really wonderful review from Erica L. Sanchez in the New York Times. If you haven't read Erica L. Sanchez's books, they're here. Buy them, read them, buy them. I'll sell. If you don't want to buy my book, for God's sake, buy her book. And it was gratifying then to get those reviews that basically said, I get it. I understand. That what you're trying to do is a little satirical and a little bit like of a thriller and a little bit of like a literary work of literary fiction and a little bit of a family drama. And they both felt like, yeah, it basically works. And so, yeah, it's like, I guess I'm trying to think of like a succinct way to kind of like summarize all of that, because, you know, I feel like, and I teach at Indiana University, you know, and I always tell my students the same thing, like, you know, you can't really control the feedback you get, you can't really control all of these things, all you can really focus on is the work. And it's great advice, but it's really, really hard to do. At the end of the day, you still want that one person, that one sort of reader to say, yes, I get it. Even if I think what you're doing like is ludicrous or absurd, I get it, and I understand it, and I see what you're attempting to do with this work. So yeah, so hopefully we're off the roller coaster now.
Questions? Anyone want to start?
I have a question. I'd love to hear more about Iris and her sister, because they stand in such opposites. And so what were you kind of trying to convey in terms of maybe generations or siblings within a family that is, you know, of color or from another country?
Also the mark of a great publicist, the first person to ask a question during that awkward silence where nobody has asked a question. Yeah. I've been working with Alex for the past several months, and she's just absolutely superb. Thank you. So Iris has a younger sister, and part of the sort of dynamic of the book is sort of the tension between Iris, who was raised during a certain period of time in American history, believed a certain way, believed in a certain kind of American life. And then her younger sister, Serena, who basically has just decided, well, all these things that we've been told we have to do this way, we don't have to do them anymore. We can just dismantle them. We can just go ahead and like just do something entirely different. And I think that, to me, feels very authentic to the experience that I'm having as somebody who is older and seeing the experience amongst younger people, or also my siblings. Quick detour. My biological father abandoned me when I was 3 years old, or took off, depending on the language you want to use. And I didn't find him until 2010. Until I was about 36 years old. And all of a sudden, you know, he's there, and he had three, you know, he started over to his family. He had like 3 daughters. So all of a sudden I had 3 new sisters. And, you know, we've embraced each other, just kind of like immediately. And if you want to read about that story, it's in a memoir called Take This Man. Maybe they have copies here, or you can order it here if you would like. Sorry, very crass announcement or commercial, but whatever. My younger sisters are kind of like also in that spectrum. Like you can see the difference, sort of like one sister who's like, this is the way things are. And the middle sister's like, well, this is the way maybe things could be. And my youngest sister, Natalie, God love her, is like, this is the way things should be instead. And so I wanted something to like capture that sort of tension, because, you know, I, as somebody who works with undergrads and grad students, like, it can be challenging for me to see, like, you know, these young people kind of like storming the barricades, but they absolutely should be doing it. And we absolutely should be supporting them, you know? And it also kind of is like, wow, like, you know, yeah, it never occurred to me to just say, like, let's just dismantle this. Maybe we don't have to do the same. Like, it literally never occurred to me. It never occurred to me that we could just operate outside of this system and do something different. So, you know, every time like a student or like one of my sisters, you know, says something, you know, we should do it this way. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that like, that's another one of the threads that's kind of driving this book, is that Iris needs her younger sister in the same way that her younger sister needs Iris. You need both of these threads. You need that knowledge and the experience, and also the ability to agitate for change. You need both of them to be working together. So, yeah.
Hi. So
Hi.
I haven't read your book, so I don't have questions on the book, but just something that I wanted to, you know, get your thoughts on, just based on the stuff that you read. So, I mean, this is something I have noticed, you know, especially among like second gen, you know, immigrants, that there's this desire to conform and to leave their language behind and to speak English and to be perceived as American, and this is something that I see as pretty unfortunate, and I see this very often, especially like minority groups, and I think that this, you know, results in like great cultural loss with people leaving like roots behind and language behind just to conform. So I was wondering if that was something that was on your mind when you know, wrote this book. Like I see this as like a pretty big issue that we should like push back on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for asking that. It's absolutely on my mind. And I think that as somebody who primarily writes literary fiction, which is a weird thing to say because I've only published 2 novels in 13 years, but I'm standing by it. As somebody who primarily writes literary fiction, yeah, like my fiction is very interested in race, ethnicity, ideas of ethnic identity development, all of those types of things. But I also am aware that like people don't read literary fiction to get lectured at. They want a story, right? They want something that essentially like will be transporting and maybe transformative in some kind of way. So my goal with this book and anything that I attempt to write is that attempt to basically distill those feelings and distill those experiences into something that is engaging. I mean, I think you used the phrase a while ago when we were talking that you was like, oh, this is a real page turner. And the fact that like, you know, the Washington Post said this is a thriller, like, I'm like, great, awesome, right? Because maybe you wouldn't be sold on the idea of reading a 300-page novel about ethnic identity development, you know, like, but maybe if you read something that's like, oh, this is a thriller, and there's like something propulsive there and something that maybe could reach you in a way that perhaps if I had just written it in a more direct or didactic way, then that's great. That's what I'd really like to do. That's my goal, especially with the next, because I've got 2 books that I'm thinking about now, and I swear they will not take another 13 years to do. So I don't got another 13 years for each book, but like that's my goal, is to like figure out what the ideas are, what I'm interested in, and to distill them in a way so that it feels organic to fiction. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But yeah, those are things that like I think about all the time, and they're things that I experience every day. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Hi.
Hey there. In addition, like, aside from, you know, current events and stuff, what would you say are the books or stories that you feel like your book is in conversation with or a lineage from?
Yeah. So there are 2 books that I was thinking about a lot when I was writing this. One was Exit West by Mohsin Hamid, which if you haven't read it, it's absolutely phenomenal. I can happily give you advertisements for a lot of books here. So, you know, I'm sure the proprietors here will be happy if you not just buy my book, but a stack of books. So I don't know if they have it on the shelves, but Exit West by Mohsin Hamid, which if you haven't read, it's basically about like a couple that fall in love in a city that's in the grips of a civil war. And then they discover that there's like a magic portal that they can go through to emigrate to another part of the world. I think he did what I was trying to do, but he did it better. And I'm not just saying like, I mean, I think it's an amazing book. I also read Family Life by Akhil Sharma, which you haven't checked out. Really, really amazing stuff. And the conceit of it is that like this young Indian immigrant comes to America with his family, and his older brother injures his head in a swimming accident. And then he and his family have to take care of him. It's very short. It's 224 pages. I think he wrote this amazing essay in the New Yorker about how it took him 13 years to write that book. And I think he went through like several thousand pages, like just so many different drafts. But man, that book is just absolutely extraordinary. So I feel like those books I would be honored if like I felt like my book was in conversation with those books. And they're really excellent, and you should totally check them out or buy them if they're here. Yeah, hi.
Yeah, hi. I'm curious about your writing process, considering it took 13 years to fully craft the novel. What does that do with your relationship to the characters, the setting, and how did that make it, did it make it easier or harder for it to be satirical? Is that kind of why other genres were somewhat brought in to keep it alive?
I hadn't considered that, but that's a great explanation, and I'm going to use that from now on. That's totally the reason why it took me as long as it did. Also to make it clear, yeah, like I was doing other things. Yeah, as well, because no, I think oftentimes you think like, oh, it took 13 years. Like really, like like what, 3 words a day or 3 words a month? Like like what kind of timetable are we on here? In that time, I wrote and published a memoir, and I also put together an anthology of original essays called "We Wear the Mask," which is about ethnic and racial passing, which is published by Beacon Press, which I'm also really proud of. I did it with my co-collaborator Lisa Page, who's a professor at George Washington University, which is just it's, I don't know if it's here, it's on Amazon or whatever. So I put those 2 books together. So I feel like those books essentially prepped me for this book here. And so I think like the idea of the wall like kind of like came into focus right around 2016, in part because if you want to like project yourself back into the summer of 2016, not that we need to, because you just have to look at the front page of the New York Times today, and there we are again, right? Talking about the same thing, same person. But I became aware that word wall had become something different. It wasn't just a dead word anymore. It was animated. It was like basically like, it was like the punctuation at the end of a football chant. It was something that was animal. It was something that was mobile. And I wanted to try to capture that in some way, but I knew that like any attempt to kind of like tackle it head on was just not going to work. So I think that time is just basically getting out the bad writing so that only the good writing is left. And there was a lot of bad writing with this. I hope I got most of it. I don't know. If you buy it, you can tell me and be the judge.
So we have maybe one more, and then we're winding down. And do we have instructions on book signings up front?
Yeah, the signing will be right.
So sign books afterwards, and one last quick question.
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the bands and how
Yeah.
you came up with that idea. I mean, they're very similar to like consumer technologies
Yeah.
that we have, like Apple Watch, which also can be surveillance tools. But
Yeah.
in this story, you mentioned their government issues.
Yeah.
I was wondering
Yeah.
about integrating that into the story.
Yeah, so the conceit in the story is that the person, the brainchild of this is someone from Silicon Valley who is the daughter of a supermarket shopping magnate, which I thought, oh, great, like that seems so on the nose, I'm gonna use it, it's so ridiculous, right? That, like I was thinking about like at least 5 or 6 years ago. And so again, that was something that was always integral to the process. And then as these things just kind of like progressed, right? And just realizing, oh, like the Apple Watch is like, oh, it's a new innovation, and now it's just a thing. The fact that like when I left New York, right? Like you had to use Metro cards, and now you just tap your phone and it's just a thing. And the idea that basically, as long as something is convenient, it's just layered on top of what our life is. And we basically kind of grumble about it for a while, and then we accept it, and then it just becomes a thing. And so that, coupled with, I think a lot of what was happening with COVID and the mask and like, oh, are you wearing a mask? Are you not wearing a mask? I have a vague idea of what it was like for all of you here in New York. And I imagine it was very terrible and just a very kind of calamitous experience, right? I live in the Midwest. I live in Indiana. And the nature of just even wearing a mask, without getting too much, because I know this is being recorded, just the whole idea of that became something radically different. It ceased to be just, oh, this is, I'm wearing this to protect my health. It became something more. And so I realized kind of putting those two, if that makes sense, putting those two things together, the technology and like, wearing this becomes like almost like a marker of patriotism in the novel. It becomes this thing to do, and it's a way to essentially like kind of divide the haves and the have-nots. Like it feels almost like very just kind of like, like tribal in a sense. I don't know if we've seen that with like current like technological innovations, but I don't think we're that far off. So to me, it just felt like a very natural thing to kind of bring that into a book where there's a magic wall growing out of the ground.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.